Ever heard about a face that could launch like 1,000 ships?
Yeah.
One so captivating, it could spark a war that would echo through history for, like, millennia.
Oh, yeah.
That's Helen of Troy. A
Wow.
woman wrapped in myth and mystery,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe just a little bit of controversy.
Yeah, yeah.
So today, we're going deep into her world,
Okay.
sifting through ancient poems, scholarly analyses.
Right.
We've even got some modern philosophical takes you sent us.
Awesome.
So it's crazy how one
Yeah.
name, Helen of Troy,
Right.
instantly brings up such vivid imagery.
Yeah, for sure.
We think of epic battles and ancient gods,
Of course.
and obviously like that irresistible beauty
Mm-hmm.
that seems to have totally just captivated everyone she met.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like she's become this like cultural shorthand for beauty and its power.
Exactly.
But I'm really curious to unpack what's beneath the surface.
Okay.
To really understand who Helen was, we've got to go back to the beginning, right?
Right.
And even Helen's origin story is anything but ordinary.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's start with Leda and the Swan, the poem by W.B. Yeats.
Okay.
It perfectly captures the drama.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking Zeus disguised as a swan
Right.
and Leda, the queen of Sparta.
Yeah.
And let's just say their encounter,
Mm-hmm.
it isn't exactly a fairy tale romance.
It's not. No.
So,
Yeah.
it's got to be a pretty intense way to enter the world,
Yeah.
being born from a union of God and mortal.
Right.
And then on top of all that, there's the whole egg thing.
Uh-huh.
Helen and her siblings hatching from an egg.
Yeah.
It feels like straight out of a fantasy novel.
Right. It really blurs the lines between ordinary and extraordinary.
Totally.
And there are actually even more, like, fantastical versions of her origin.
Really?
Yeah. One suggests that the goddess Aphrodite herself turned into a swan egg.
Wow.
So that links Helen to beauty and desire, like, right from the moment of her conception.
So it's almost like she's destined for greatness or notoriety, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
right from the start.
From the very beginning.
It's not your typical birth announcement.
No, not at all.
But then we see this sense of destiny play out in a darker way.
Yeah.
You mentioned she was abducted by Theseus when she was only 12.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
Even as a child, Helen's beauty is shown as this potent, almost dangerous force.
Yeah.
It's a theme that keeps coming back throughout her story.
Right.
Beauty as both a blessing and a burden.
Like a cautionary tale almost, right?
Yeah.
This idea that beauty can attract unwanted attention, even at such a young age.
Absolutely.
And speaking of attention, let's talk about that famous oath
Okay.
sworn by all of Helen's suitors.
Yeah.
We're talking about all the most eligible bachelors in Greece vying for her hand in marriage.
It's amazing. It really gives you a glimpse into the social and political dynamics of the time.
Right.
Imagine all that pressure on Helen
Oh my gosh.
to know that these, like, powerful men are not only competing for her,
Mm-hmm.
but they're also swearing to protect her and
Yes.
whoever ends up with her from,
Right.
like, any threat.
Yeah, I can't imagine the weight of that expectation.
No.
And then it gets even more interesting
Yeah.
when you consider that Odysseus is the one who came up with this oath.
Mm-hmm.
The guy known for his cunning and strategic thinking.
Yeah.
It's like he could see the potential for conflict way down the line.
He was always, like, a few steps ahead.
Totally.
But so getting back to Helen's suitors.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Menelaus wins her hand,
Okay.
becomes her husband.
Right.
But as we know, the happily ever after doesn't exactly go to plan.
That's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
I mean, Menelaus pretty much becomes the, poster child for infidelity.
Pretty much, yeah.
Even being married to Helen of Troy couldn't guarantee marital bliss.
It adds a little irony to the whole story, for sure.
Definitely.
But to understand how things went so wrong,
Yeah.
we need to talk about the Judgment of Paris.
Yeah, okay.
It's like one of the most iconic stories from Greek mythology.
Right.
It's got a beauty contest, a golden apple, and some serious divine intervention.
Okay, let's break it down.
Okay.
We've got Paris, a Trojan prince.
Right.
He's tasked with judging a beauty contest between three goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite.
Right.
And Aphrodite, wanting to win, well, she offers Paris a little incentive.
Yeah.
She promises him the most beautiful woman in the world
Mm-hmm.
if he chooses her.
Oh, right.
And, who could resist that, really?
It makes you think about, like, the ethics of divine intervention.
Oh, totally.
But it really speaks to the power of beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Even goddesses are willing to manipulate things to, like, claim it.
Yeah.
So Paris chooses Aphrodite, and she keeps her promise by
Yeah.
setting up a meeting between him and Helen.
Okay.
Paris travels to Sparta, and, well, things get a little complicated.
This is where things get a little blurry, right?
Yeah.
There's debate about whether Helen willingly left with Paris or if she was abducted.
Right.
Some say she was stolen away against her will, while others say she was drawn to Paris.
Yeah.
Maybe even chose to go with him.
Exactly. It's like one of the biggest questions about Helen.
Right.
Was she a pawn of fate, or did she make a conscious choice?
Right.
Even if it was a controversial one.
And that's what makes her story so interesting, isn't it? We're left to wrestle with all these different interpretations.
Yeah.
To consider all the complexities of her character and all the forces that might have shaped her actions.
For sure.
But one thing's for sure.
Yeah.
Her leaving for Troy set off a chain of events.
Oh, yeah.
That changed everything.
It really did.
Menelaus obviously wants his wife back.
Yeah.
And remember that oath sworn by Helen's suitors? It comes into play.
Yeah.
They have to honor their pledge
Right.
and help Menelaus get back what was taken.
Uh-huh.
So the stage is set for the Trojan War.
Exactly. So welcome back to our deep dive into Helen of Troy.
Yeah, we've gone through all those myths and legends surrounding her.
All right, all those captivating stories.
Passed down through, like, centuries. We've talked about her divine origins. That oath that bound her suitors.
Right.
The judgment of Paris, of course.
Of course.
And, her role in starting the Trojan War.
Huge role.
So now let's shift gears a little.
Yeah.
And look at the archaeology side of things.
Right.
To see if we can maybe unearth some historical truth behind these incredible tales.
It's a natural question to ask, right?
Totally.
I mean, we love the myths.
Yeah.
But we can't help but wonder, was there a real Helen of Troy?
Exactly.
Like a real flesh and blood woman?
Right. Was there a woman whose beauty could actually launch, like, 1,000 ships?
Yeah.
Or is she just a figment of the ancient imagination?
It's a good question.
So that's where Heinrich Schliemann comes in, right?
Exactly.
You might remember him from our earlier conversation. The archaeologist whose obsession with Helen and the Trojan War drove him to go on this, like, crazy quest.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, talk about taking your love of literature to the next level.
Oh, right. He was so captivated by Homer's Iliad.
That he decided to find the actual city of Troy. Wow. So he was convinced that the stories were based on real events.
Totally convinced.
And he thought he could prove it.
He really did.
So in the late 19th century, he started excavating a site in modern-day Turkey called Hisarlik. And he was sure that was ancient Troy.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did he find? Like, did he unearth skeletons holding, like, ancient beauty products?
Yeah.
Or, like, the remnants of 1,000 ships?
Not quite, but what he did find was pretty incredible.
Okay.
His excavations uncovered a bunch of ancient cities.
Wow.
Like layered on top of each other.
Yeah.
It showed centuries of history buried there.
That's amazing.
And he claimed he found evidence of this massive destruction layer.
Okay.
Which he thought was from the Trojan War.
So he really thought he'd found the actual remains of the war from the Iliad.
It did, yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's mind-blowing.
I know, right? To think you could touch something from a story that's been around for thousands of years.
I know.
It was a huge claim, made Schliemann super famous.
Right.
But over time, his methods and conclusions, they've been questioned.
Really?
By who?
Well, by other archaeologists?
Oh, so they don't all agree with his findings.
Not exactly.
Sounds like there's more to the story.
Yeah, well, let's just say that Schliemann's way of doing archaeology was a little more enthusiastic than scientific sometimes.
Okay.
He was so sure he'd find treasure and proof of the Trojan War that he wasn't always, like, super careful or organized in his digs.
Oh, I see.
It's possible he might have even damaged some of the archaeological layers.
Really?
Because he was in such a hurry to find what he thought was the Trojan level.
So maybe he jumped to conclusions.
Yeah, maybe.
Based on what he wanted to believe.
It's a good reminder, that even when we're looking for historical truth, our own biases can get in the way.
Definitely.
And so there's still debate about whether that destruction layer Schliemann found
can really be linked to the Trojan War.
Right, and even if it could, that doesn't prove Helen of Troy existed.
No, it doesn't.
So where does that leave us in our search for the historical Helen?
Right.
Are we back to square one?
Well, Not completely.
I'm-
We might never have absolute proof that Helen existed,
Yeah.
but the archaeology can still show us
Yeah.
what the world she supposedly lived in was like.
Okay.
The Bronze Age, when the Trojan War happened,
Mm-hmm.
it was a really interesting time in the ancient world.
What was so special about it?
Well, it was a time of powerful kingdoms,
Okay.
influential rulers,
Right.
trade networks that spanned huge distances,
Wow.
and yeah, probably a lot of conflict and war.
So even if Helen's a myth,
Mm-hmm.
the world she lived in could have been real.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that these stories, even the ones with all the mythology,
Right.
they often come from a real historical setting.
They do.
And archaeology has uncovered so much
It-
about this sophisticated and interconnected world,
Mhm.
with palaces and burial rituals and art.
It's incredible to think about walking through the ruins of those palaces,
I know.
imagining the people who live there,
Right.
all the drama,
Power struggles.
the love affairs, betrayals.
Yeah.
It's like stepping into a real-life epic poem.
It really is.
These palaces weren't just homes.
No, they were centers of power,
Yeah.
wealth, culture.
And the craftsmanship of those artifacts they found. The jewelry, weapons, pottery.
It's amazing. It shows how skilled they were.
It sounds like a society that really valued beauty and artistry,
They did.
which makes the stories about Helen's beauty even more intriguing.
Right.
So have they found anything about the role of women in this society?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
One of the most exciting discoveries has been the Linear B tablets.
Okay, I've heard of those,
Yeah.
but I'll admit I don't know much about them.
So imagine being able to read, like, the grocery lists,
Okay.
the inventory records.
The notes from a civilization thousands of years ago?
Wow.
That's what Linear B tablets are.
That's incredible.
They're a direct look into everyday life in Mycenaean society.
It's like finding an ancient time capsule
Totally.
filled with everyday details that suddenly become amazing.
Right, because of how old they are.
Exactly.
And what these tablets tell us
Yeah.
is that women in Mycenaean society weren't just stuck at home. They had power and influence.
Wow.
They were queens, priestesses, even rulers.
So even if Helen's story is a mix of myth and history,
Mm-hmm.
it's not crazy to think that a powerful and captivating woman
Right.
could have played a big role back then.
No, not at all.
It challenges what we think about women in ancient societies.
It really does.
And it makes you wonder if the stories about Helen,
Yeah.
her beauty, her captivating presence,
Mm.
her ability to inspire such strong emotions,
Right.
maybe they reflect a bit of truth. Maybe they recognize the power that some women actually had.
It's a compelling thought, for sure.
Even if we can't completely separate fact from fiction,
Yeah.
we're learning more about the world that created these stories.
Yeah.
A world where women weren't just passive figures,
Right.
but active participants in everything.
Exactly. And remember, even if Helen herself is a myth, myths tell us something about our values, our
Right.
beliefs, even our fears.
Right.
They give us a look into the human mind.
Okay.
They explore things like love, loss, betrayal, and the lasting power of beauty.
It's almost like Helen's story, whether it's true or not,
Yeah.
acts as a bridge to the past.
Right.
It lets us see the Bronze Age
Yeah.
and grapple with these big questions.
Questions that still resonate with us today.
Exactly. It's a reminder that the past isn't really gone.
Mm-hmm.
These stories still shape how we see ourselves
Yeah.
and the world.
And speaking of stories,
Yes.
there's another figure connected to Helen
Okay.
who deserves some attention.
Okay.
Someone whose story is even darker and more intriguing.
Really? Who's that?
You're talking about Clytemnestra, Helen's sister.
Oh, wow.
Now, there's a woman whose story is a real Greek tragedy.
And that's where we'll pick up
Yes.
in the final part of our deep dive.
Get ready, listeners, because things are about to get even more dramatic.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Helen of Troy's world.
And this time, we're focusing on a figure just as compelling as Helen.
Maybe even more so, you're saying?
I think so, yeah. Her sister, Clytemnestra.
Okay, Clytemnestra.
So if Helen's story is all about beauty and allure,
Right.
Clytemnestra's is about power, revenge,
Oh, wow.
the darker side of ambition, you could say.
Okay.
Remember how Helen was abducted by Theseus when she was young?
Yeah, it was a really traumatic event.
Right. And it shaped her whole life.
It showed that even those protected by beauty and status
Mm-hmm.
can still be vulnerable.
Exactly. And Clytemnestra also experiences a similar trauma,
Okay.
but a different kind.
Oh, okay.
Her marriage to Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, leader of the Greek forces in the Trojan War. Well, let's just say It wasn't a love story.
So what happened? What kind of trauma are we talking about?
Well, imagine being a mother
Yeah.
and having your husband sacrifice your own daughter
Oh, my God.
to appease a goddess.
No way.
That's exactly what Agamemnon did.
He sacrificed his own daughter.
He did. Her name was Iphigenia.
Wow.
He did it to get favorable winds for the Greek fleet.
Oh, my gosh. That's a brutal decision.
It is. It's hard to imagine Clytemnestra's despair.
I know, to lose a child like that
Mm-hmm.
and at the hands of your own husband.
It was a complete betrayal, and
Wow.
it stayed with Clytemnestra for the entire 10 years
Oh, 10 years.
that Agamemnon was away fighting in Troy.
So while he's off fighting for glory,
Right.
Clytemnestra is dealing with this unbelievable grief and anger.
Yeah.
It's a different side of the Trojan War, isn't it?
It is. While the men are battling for Helen,
Right.
Clytemnestra is fighting her own internal war
Right.
against the pain of loss and the need for revenge.
And then Agamemnon finally returns to Mycena.
Hmm.
Victorious, but with spoils of war,
Mm-hmm.
including a new concubine, Cassandra.
Yeah. Clytemnestra is ready for him.
This does not sound like it's going to end well.
It doesn't, no.
It feels like something's about to happen.
Yeah, Clytemnestra, after years of resentment
Mm-hmm.
and wanting revenge,
Right.
she takes things into her own hands.
What does she do?
She murders Agamemnon.
Oh, wow.
It sends shockwaves through the kingdom,
Yeah.
but she doesn't stop there.
Really?
She also kills Cassandra.
So her revenge is complete.
It's a pretty dark turn of events.
It is. It's like the violence from Troy
Mm.
came back to Mycenae.
Yeah, right to the heart of the kingdom.
Clytemnestra's actions are shocking, for sure.
Yeah,
But they make you think.
they do.
Is she just a cold-blooded killer?
Mm-hmm.
Or is she a victim herself,
Right.
pushed to her limit by Agamemnon's cruelty?
And years of suffering.
That's a tough question. Morally.
It is.
I mean, taking a life is never right.
Ooh.
But you can't ignore all the pain she went through.
That's the complexity of Clytemnestra's character.
Right.
She's not easy to define.
Yeah.
She's strong, intelligent, capable of love and loyalty.
But also capable of incredible violence.
When pushed too far.
It's interesting how her story is so different from Helen's.
Huh.
Helen's beauty started a war.
Right.
But Clytemnestra's experience with betrayal and violence
Mm-hmm.
led her down this path of revenge.
They're both powerful women,
Yeah.
but their power shows itself in very different ways.
And their stories are linked together forever.
They are. Just like Helen's abduction started the Trojan War,
Right?
Clytemnestra's revenge sets off another chain of events
Oh, wow.
that continues the cycle of violence and tragedy.
It's like their lives represent the destructive power of war.
Exactly.
Not just on the battlefield, but in
Ah.
the families and people left behind.
It's a reminder that war has far-reaching consequences.
Yes.
It leaves scars that go way beyond the actual fighting.
It makes you wonder if the ancient Greeks were trying to tell us something. Were these stories warnings
Maybe.
about ambition and power and the way violence breeds more violence?
It's possible.
It's amazing that these ancient stories,
Yeah.
with all the fantastical elements and
Mhm.
larger-than-life characters, right?
Still speak to us today.
They really do. They tap into those basic human emotions.
Love, hate, jealousy, betrayal,
The need for power.
the desire for justice.
And in the end, isn't that what makes a truly great story?
I think so, yeah.
It goes beyond time and place,
Mm-hmm.
connects us to these universal human experiences.
Experiences that have captivated us for centuries.
This has been an amazing deep dive.
It has.
We've explored myths and legends, looked at archaeological findings, and we've learned about two of the most fascinating women in history.
Or mythology, depending on how you look at it.
Exactly. So as we wrap things up,
Yeah.
what are some key takeaways? What should we remember?
I think the main thing is
Yeah.
Helen of Troy's story is much more complicated
Right.
than just a beautiful woman starting a war.
It's been told and retold for so long,
Thousands of years.
changing and evolving each time.
And through it all, Helen remains a mystery.
Yeah.
A figure who continues to intrigue us.
Mm.
Is she a victim of fate? A symbol of beauty? A woman who chose her own path?
It's a great question.
The answer probably depends on who you ask.
That's a great point.
It's up to each of us to decide what her story means to us,
Yeah.
to think about those timeless questions it brings up,
Right.
and how they connect to our own lives.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive
It's been a pleasure.
into the world of Helen of Troy.
Until next time.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions.
And keep looking for those deeper meanings.
in the stories that shape our world.